Video studio StreetSpeaks presents The Story of Creation. The story of creation. These are the words of the god Nebuchadnezzar, who said, I am the creator of what hath come into being, and I myself came into being under the form of the god Keper, and I came into being in primeval time. I came into being in the form of Kepera, and I am the creator of what did come into being. That is to say, I formed myself out of the primeval matter, and I made and formed myself out of the substance which existed in primeval time. My name is Osiris, who is the primeval matter of primeval matter. I have done my will in everything in this earth. I have spread myself abroad therein, and I have made strong my hand. I was one by myself, for the gods had not been brought forth. I brought my own name into my mouth as a word of power, and I forthwith came into being under the form of things which are, and under the form of Kepera. I came into being from out of primeval matter, and from the beginning I appeared under the form of the multitudinous things which exist. Nothing whatsoever existed at that time in this earth, and it was I who made whatsoever was made. I was one by myself, and there was no other being who worked with me in that place. I made all the things under the forms of which I appeared then by means of the soul god which I raised into firmness at that time from out of noon, from a state of inactivity. I found no place whatsoever there whereon I could stand. I worked by the power of a spell by means of my heart. I laid a foundation for things before me, and whatsoever was made, I made. I was one by myself, and I laid the foundations of things by means of my heart, and I made the other things which came into being, and the things of Kepera which were made were manifold, and their offspring came into existence from the things to which they gave birth. This eye saw an endless amount of stories. It knows everything about us. It observes us now and saw this place before the first humans settled here. This eye saw it millions of years ago when it was located on the other side of the equator near the South Pole. It must be a dream of every scientist to look into the past with this very eye, with an objective eye, that does not distort those multitudinous things, the foundations of which were once laid by the god Nebuchadnezzar, the Lord to the uttermost limit. But are we mere mortals really able to peer into the past and look at the present with this perfect eye? We're beginning our first introductory part on the history of Tallinn, a city located in northern Europe on the shores of the Gulf of Finland. But prior to continue with the story of the city and its streets, we must speak about the history of the place where it was once founded, about the most remote past, when there was not even the land itself for its foundation, and of course, from the first people to settle in these parts whose descendants we undoubtedly are. Our documentary is called StreetSpeaks. It's about the history of the city, and therefore first and foremost about the history of its people. It is about our lives and our past. And this past of ours didn't start yesterday, or the day before yesterday, or when we, or our parents, or our grandparents were born. Carl Gustav Jung, the greatest scientist of the last century, psychologist and psychiatrist who formulated the theory of the collective unconscious, said, "We are not of today or yesterday, we are of an immense age." The streets and squares of any modern city are a mirror reflecting our faces. And beyond this mirror lies a boundless, bottomless world beyond the looking glass. And since all human history is inside us, and we are made of the past, both literally and figuratively, there can be only one answer to the question of whether history is worth knowing. We must know it, since we must find out who we are. But where does our people of the 21st century history begin, including, of course, the locals? Perhaps with those who arrived in these parts at the beginning of the Iron Age, 500 BC for linguists, historians and geneticists, believe that these people were the speakers of the ancient Uralic language, from which the modern Estonian language spoken by the present-day inhabitants developed. Or does our history begin with the Stone Age hunter-gatherers from the 9th millennium BC? For the first settlement at Puli near the Pärnu River dates to this millennium, or with their distant ancestors who appeared 300,000 years ago in Africa and moved north to Europe around 50,000 years ago, or with the Neanderthals who inhabited it long before the arrival of Homo sapiens, or even earlier, or with chimpanzees, or perhaps with blue algae, or with the first bacteria, or indeed with the very beginning of life on our planet? Or does our history begin with the formation of planet Earth, supposedly 4.6 billion years ago, or with the formation of the universe, which arose about 13.8 billion years ago as a result of the Big Bang? But astrophysicists currently are not quite certain that our universe came into being as a result of the Big Bang, since at the present stage of scientific development, this theory diverges from experiments. It's entirely possible that the explosion did occur, but other explosions preceded it. Therefore, the universe arose even earlier, but how many billions of years earlier than the previously stated date? Or perhaps our roots are even deeper, truly lying beyond the boundaries of space and time? Or perhaps there was no beginning at all, and everything has always existed. But then, it turns out that our roots lie precisely in this always, and the very idea that we know this is proof of this. Therefore, maybe our history starts precisely in this always. Since we can't show what our shared homeland, something called always, actually looks like, we decided to show you the endless starry sky. But now, let's come back down from the heavens to Earth, to a tiny grain of dust drifting through space. And not just to Earth, but to one microscopic spot on its surface, a place known as Estonian land, to tell the story of its deepest past, its geological past, of life here long before humans ever appeared. We left Tallinn, boarded a small boat at the port of Kakumäe, and headed toward the Pakri Peninsula. Our route runs along some of the most beautiful places in Estonia, but from the sea these shores have rarely been seen, not by tourists, and not even by most locals. So we decided to show them here, in the opening of StreetSpeaks. And it makes sense. Everything to port can easily be called Greater Tallinn, closely tied to the capital. People mostly work in Tallinn, but live and relax outside the city. Summer houses are being converted for year-round living, and new neighborhoods are rising on what used to be open fields. The district of Kakumäe, where we set off toward Paldiski, and the neighboring area of Tiskre are all part of Tallinn. We'll explore them in detail, street by street, in other episodes. This introduction, however, is about the geological past, a time before humans. So, in the following scenes, we avoided signs of modern life and kept commentary to a minimum, so that the voiceover wouldn't drown out the voice of nature itself. A trip from Kakumäe to Paldiski. The boat leaves the harbour on the western shore of Pakri Bay. Our course is set west. We pass around the Pakri Peninsula. The peninsula lies just 12 kilometres from the city centre. It's a low rise, reaching no more than 15 metres above sea level. The ground here is made of fine-grained sandstone layered with clay. The sandstone shifts in colour, from pale brown to cold, steel grey. Closer to the water, bands of blue clay emerge. Thin streams of reddish, rusty water seep through the rock. Along the shore, large blocks of sandstone lie scattered, broken off from the steep cliff above. At the tip of the cape, the sandstone forms a wave-cut cliff. These rocks date back to the Cambrian period, formed around 520 million years ago. Back then, this region lay in cool southern latitudes, some 50 to 60 degrees from the South Pole. At that time, the ancient continent of Baltica, which included what is now Estonia, was slowly drifting toward its present position. But the landscape we see today took shape much later. Hundreds of millions of years passed. And only in the Quaternary period, when glaciers ruled this land, did the modern relief finally emerge from these ancient southern rocks. Sandstone is a soft rock, easily worn away. The landscape is constantly changing under the force of wind and water. They pull trees out by the roots and send heavy blocks of stone crashing into the sea. But these untamed forces of nature destroy and create at the same time. Light and shadow shape massive forms. Right now, among the broken slabs of sandstone, a grim male profile has appeared, its gaze fixed on the endless blue. The cormorant was named Bird of the Year 2025 by the Estonian Ornithological Society. Researchers wanted to draw public attention to the species' growing population, to study its impact on the ecosystem, and to challenge the myth that cormorants are an invasive species that destroy fish stocks. As of 2024, around 43,000 pairs were nesting across Estonia. One of their many colonies is located right here, on the white sandy shoal of Vääna-Jõesuu, at the tip of the Pakri Peninsula. At the water's edge stands a symbol of Pakri, the so-called black stone. Once it rested on top of the cliff, but the sea and the wind undermined the shore and the rock collapsed, falling down into the water with the crumbling edge of the coast. Exploring the tip of the cape from the sea or from the shore is not easy. The western side can be reached at low tide, but even there, you have to be extremely careful not to slip on the treacherous stones slick with mud. As for the eastern shore, walking from the cape back to the harbour is simply impossible. The narrow strip of coast is covered in water up to your knees, or rather in a thick, sticky mass of black, rotting silt. But now, in the winter of 2026, as we were editing this episode, all those summer difficulties simply disappeared. We hadn't seen a winter this harsh and this steady in more than 20 years. The sea along the shore had frozen solid. Places once out of reach could now be crossed on foot. We stepped into a strange and beautiful world of ice, frost, snow, and fog. A rare transformation of the landscape, seen and captured on camera. At the Blackstone, we say goodbye to Pakri and move on. The Pakri cliff felt like a kind of introduction to the Vääna-Jõesuu glint. From here, from the viewing platform at the top of the escarpment, the view opens wide. Straight ahead lies the island of Naissaar. Its name translates as Women's Island. It's 12 kilometers away. For centuries, the island has served as a landmark for sailors, a natural gateway to Tallinn. To the right, you can see the Cape of Pakri. From here, it's about 3.5 kilometers. And farther right, in the foreground, lies the residential district of Tiskre. Beyond it, a broad panorama of Tallinn unfolds along the horizon. We climbed down to the foot of the Vääna-Jõesuu escarpment onto a small beach. Ahead, beyond the reeds, the Pakri Peninsula comes into view. Let's take a look at the cliff from below. We walk along a narrow strip of shore, strewn with boulders, large and small, while above us a stone wall rises, towering up to 35 meters high. In places, it reaches all the way to the sea. Underfoot, the rocks are slick with algae. Between them, mud and water. You can pass through here only at low tide. Along the Vääna-Jõesuu glint, there are only 2 places where you can climb down without special equipment. The shore is completely covered with fallen blocks of rock. Wave after wave, the surf breaks them apart, grinding them slowly into small pebbles. The cliff face looks north. Sunlight rarely reaches here, so the mud on the stones never really dries, and it's easy to lose your footing. At times, you have to scramble up and down over piles of slabs, tree trunks, and exposed roots. The steep slopes of the Vääna-Jõesuu escarpment are far from barren. It is remarkable how trees manage to grow in places where only a few specially adapted rock plants can survive: ferns, stone crops, and bellflowers. As a result, the majestic cliff never fully reveals itself, remaining partly hidden in the shadow of trees, even in winter. In places, the sandstone wall rises quite high. Here and there, water trickles down from above. Sometimes it runs clear. Sometimes it turns dark brown, stained with iron. These small springs have a local name. They're called the Springs of Tears. Such collapses occur most often in early spring, during the snowmelt. From the upper edge of the glint, entire blocks of rock break away and tumble down to the foot of the escarpment. These falls are made more likely by vertical shafts of stone cutting through the sandstone layers and by tectonic fractures that intersect and cross one another. The glint, as an exposed bedrock formation, is a protected natural site. This means that people are not allowed to alter its natural appearance. But who could ever restrain the very forces of nature that created it? One distinctive feature of the Vääna-Jõesuu shoreline is the abundance of boulders. These are fragments of ancient rock, smoothed and polished by water, wind, and time. The rocks themselves formed in the Archean Eon near the South Pole. During the last glaciation, continental ice tore them from their bedrock and carried them here onto the territory of modern Estonia, dragging them south from what is now Finland. We leave the Vääna-Jõesuu glint and head toward the neighboring coastal cliff near Tilgu. The place name Tilgu may be related to the Estonian word tilk, a drop, or to the verb tilgutama, to drip. Perhaps these are the tears shed by this ancient vertical rock face. This quiet weeping, this inner weakness of the stone, contrasts with the figure shaped by light and shadow and the forces of nature at the water's edge, a form that resembles a human face, its profile firm, its gaze fixed on the distance. We've seen a similar profile before, near the tip of Kakumäe. Perhaps it is only a mask, and the tears, fed endlessly by underground waters, are slowly hollowing out the rock from within. These tears, running down its cold cheeks, are the relentless force that quite literally wears the stone away and leads to the collapse of this protected place that people try, in vain, to preserve as it is. But humans, as we know, cannot restrain nature, or even themselves. The Japanese saying, "States may fall, but mountains and rivers remain," doesn't really apply to the Estonian landscape. On this tiny patch of land, nothing stays the same. Or rather, its only constant is constant change. At the base of the escarpment, wave-cut grottos appear. Locals simply call them caves. According to folk tales, pirates and bandits once sought shelter in places like these. The Tilgu caves, or niches, reach up to 4 meters deep and 3 meters high. They lie at the foot of an almost 10-meter vertical cliff of Cambrian sandstone. Fracture lines split the rock, breaking the caves into larger and larger sections until they finally collapse and new cavities form. That's why their number and their size are constantly changing. In some places, near these openings in the sandstone, you can spot oddly shaped pillars, the so-called organ pipes. The caves are registered as protected natural features and are visible only at low tide. The only way to reach them is from the sea. About 300 meters from the shore, you can see a pile of boulders. Unfortunately, these are only the remains of once mighty stones, blasted apart at the beginning of the First World War. This group of boulders is known as Hagen's stones, named after the 19th century landscape painter August Matthias Hagen, who preserved the memory of their former grandeur in his artworks. The Hagen stones were also mentioned in the works of academician Gregor von Helmersen, founder of the Russian School of Geological Cartography and honorary doctor of the University of Tartu. As early as 1879, at a meeting of the Tartu Society of Naturalists, he became the first to raise the question of protecting nature in Estonia. Our next stop is the Suurupi Peninsula. It lies about 22 kilometers from the center of Tallinn. This area is known for its remarkable number of glacial erratics, boulders carried here from far away by the ice. In fact, when it comes to boulders, Estonia is an undisputed leader on the European scale. The name Suurupi clearly comes from the Estonian words suur and pi, together meaning big head, and the shape of the peninsula seems to confirm this idea. The cliff of the Suurupi Peninsula is made up of layers of ancient rock, striking in their variety of textures and colors. Along this stretch of coast, geological processes expose layers that are more than 450 million years old. The shoreline is shaped by erosion, and the exposed rock often crumbles and collapses. The geological structure of the peninsula is distinctly layered, a feature typical of the country's northern coast. These shots were filmed on the official Suurupi beach, The secret beach, unlike the nearby official one, has no gentle access routes. One of the main features that sets the beaches of Suurupi apart from others west of Tallinn is their surface. They are entirely covered with pebbles in pinkish-grey tones. These pebbles were formed by the friction of water and glacial ice ground down from fragments of crystalline rock. Ahead, on the Cape of Niinamää, stands a complex of former fog signal buildings, constructed in 1898. In the past, the station's signals helped ships navigate through the fog, especially the thick night fog that often forms over the sea in spring and winter. In 2020, the state put the Cape, together with the buildings, up for sale. The property was auctioned off for €455,000, with a starting price of just €99,000. The height of the escarpment varies from 4 to 5 meters, so in scale it can hardly compete with the neighboring cliff of Vääna-Jõesuu. But the sandstones in Suurupi are unusual. Their internal structure often breaks the normal layering. Here you can find the so-called pea sandstone, as well as rocks with patterns that resemble a rolled pastry. These deformations and fractured layers tell the story of a restless geological past in this place. As in the other places along our journey, the rock continues to weep even in winter. Streams of tears run down its face toward the base of the escarpment and flow out into the open sea. Beyond the Pakri Peninsula lies the next landmark along the western coast of northern Estonia, a place called Vääna-Jõesuu. It's located about 25 kilometers from the center of Tallinn. The name may be hard to pronounce, but it simply means the mouth of the Vääna River. It also echoes the Estonian verb väänama, to bend or to twist, and the river truly lives up to its name. It winds and curves through the landscape before flowing into Lohusaalu Bay. Its length is 64 kilometers. The Vääna River, in its present form, took shape only after the retreat of the post-glacial waters. The present-day shallow river is nothing like the one that flowed here before the Ice Age. Evidence of that ancient river comes from a buried river valley discovered by geologists. Its scale is impressive. The prehistoric river carved a deep channel into the glint, more than 4 kilometers wide. It stretched between the modern capes of Suurupi and Turri Salu. After the glaciers retreated, the valley gradually filled with layers of sand and other sediments. From the beach at Vääna-Jõesuu, the Pakri Peninsula is clearly visible, the final destination of our journey. Events that took place long before the Ice Age shaped what is now the best stretch of coastline for water sports to the west of Tallinn. Treacherous fields of boulders are limited to small sections at the edges of the beach. Along most of the shore, the sandy bottom is deep and completely free of stones. So unlike Kakumäe, Ranna-Moisa or Suurupi, Vääna-Jõesuu is above all a place for rest and relaxation. In summer, thousands of people come here to swim in the sea and sunbathe. The wide beach stretches for almost 2 kilometers. On the forest side, a line of pine trees borders the shore, and behind them, a dune offers shelter from the sea winds. The swimming season in Estonia is not very long, roughly from May until late September, and even then, it really begins only for those who don't wait for the water to warm up to at least 18 degrees. About 700 meters from the mouth of the Vääna River lies a stretch of the North Estonian glint near Turri Salu. Locals know this escarpment as Hamlet's Hill. In the summer of 1963, scenes from Hamlet by William Shakespeare were filmed here. For the production, sets were built on the gentle terrace, recreating the castle of Elsinore. As Asmu Saar, author of the guidebook Along the Tourist Route Tallinn-Kluga, wrote, "It is difficult to imagine a more fitting natural setting for Shakespeare's immortal tragedy than this high rocky escarpment of Vääna-Jõesuu. That is why the grey towers of a medieval castle once rose here, along with its massive walls, terraces and gates." Paraphrasing Asmu Saar's thought, one could say that although Vääna-Elsinore has passed into history, the glint towering above our coast still remembers those events and all the others in its multi-million-year past. Continuing the theme of timeless works of art inspired by nature itself, we should also mention another hamlet, created by the local sculptor August Ludwig Weitzenberg. One of the master's earliest significant works, it was displayed several years ago in a temporary exhibition at the Kadriorg Art Museum. Weissenberg's hamlet, too, seems perfectly at home against the backdrop of a sheer coastal cliff. The side of the glint facing the sea drops sharply to the shore, forming a steep wall almost 30 meters high. As along the stretch at Vääna-Jõesuu, rockfalls are common here. You can pass beneath the cliff from the beach at Vääna-Jõesuu to the neighboring shore of Tiuri-Salu only at low tide, and even then you have to scramble over collapsed limestone blocks, slick with algae. Walking through the water is not an option. The shallow seabed is covered with stones, slippery and hidden beneath a layer of mud. Just as along the escarpments at Vääna-Jõesuu and Tilgu, we see the rock weeping. Groundwater slowly forces its way to the surface, seeping through tiny cracks in the stone. Over time, these cracks widen, weakening the cliff and eventually triggering another collapse. In winter, the rock's streams of tears freeze in place, and the escarpment becomes covered with ice stalactites. This particular winter was especially severe, and the sea along the shore froze solid. These conditions made it possible to film the escarpment from a distance. At the top of the escarpment stands a viewing platform. From here, the Pakri Peninsula, the shore of Vääna-Jõesuu, and the endless sea unfold before the eye. This panoramic vantage point is ideal for watching the sunset. After passing beneath the cliff from the beach at Vääna-Jõesuu to the neighboring shore of Tiuri-Salu, the traveller finds more than just another stretch of coast. Along this section, the shoreline forms a natural boundary to a park, home to one of the most visited places in the surroundings of Tallinn, a waterfall. The waterfall is called Keela, named after the river Keela. At more than 111 kilometers in length, the Keela River is the fifth longest river in Estonia. The waterfall itself is 6 meters high and between 60 and 70 meters wide. By volume of water, it ranks third in the country, after the waterfalls on the Narva River and the Jõgala River. Keela is considered one of the most beautiful waterfalls in Estonia. It's also surrounded by a scenic park with century-old trees. In the 19th century, at the same time the park was created, a manor was built beside the falls, the architecturally unique Schloss Fall, designed in the neo-Gothic style. But we deliberately chose not to show the manor or the park. We don't want to distract the viewer from the work of the one architect no one has ever surpassed, nature itself. The waterfall is open to everyone. There are no technical obstacles, no difficult paths. You can simply come here any time, in any season, in the morning, during the day, or in the evening. It's hard to imagine living in Schloss Fall with a view of the falls, because once you look at them, it's almost impossible to look away. As Asmu Saar wrote in his guidebook along the tourist route Tallinn-Kluga, it is difficult to find words to describe the sound of water falling from such a height or the enchanting play of its streams. The spectacle is so majestic that this symphony of nature, this magic of water and foam, can only truly be understood by seeing the waterfall with one's own eyes. We steadily approach the Pakri Peninsula. Our final stop is the Luhusalu Peninsula. According to Agu Vitam, author of the guide Laulasmaa, Luhusalu, its outline resembles the shape of the Italian boot, while the small ancient islet of Nabe off its tip looks like neighboring Sicily. The peninsula lies about 40 kilometers from the center of Tallinn. The small islet of Nabe is also known as Pirate Island. Depending on the wind and the water level, the narrow, low isthmus connecting it to the peninsula may disappear beneath the sea, turning it into a true island, resembling Sicily. But the resemblance between the Italian and Estonian boots does not end there. That story belongs to the final destination of our journey. The eighth stop on our route, Luhusalu, is undoubtedly the most beautiful stretch of coastline we've seen, not only among the places we visited before, but perhaps in all of Estonia. This place offers more than just scenery. There's a certain energy here. It has a way of pulling you away from everyday worries and noise. Only here can you truly slow down, lose yourself for a while, and reconnect with nature itself. What distinguishes Luhusalu is its diversity. Each stretch of the peninsula, each small bay along its winding shoreline has its own character. Yet because the peninsula lies between two bays, its landscape reveals two distinct faces, the northern and the southern shores. The northern beach of Luhusalu Bay has a sandy bottom and deeper water, while the southern shore faces Lahepere Bay, where the seabed is shallow and strewn with stones. Between the northern and southern shores lies a pine forest, yet the pines themselves are different. Along the southern coast, they do not grow straight, but are bent and twisted by the western storm winds. In Estonian, they are called tuulemenid, wind-shaped pines. The most picturesque spot along the northern shore is a small cape called Surnumäe. The name translates as the Hill of the Dead. Local stories say that during times of plague, the deceased were buried here, beneath the tall pines. From this point, the entire coastline of Luhusalu Bay opens up before you. From the tip of the cape, you can see Surupi, Vääna-Jõesuu, and Turri-Salu. The shore here is also scattered with magnificent coastal boulders, a favorite resting place for water birds, gulls, cormorants, swans, ducks, great crested grebes, and grey herons. This is also an ideal place to observe birds, to sit in silence, and to take in the landscape from the shade, resting at the water's edge among the exposed, twisted roots of ancient pines. Both shores of the peninsula are home to massive erratic boulders, including the Menassaare stone on the southern coast. Its diameter exceeds 21.5 meters, and it cannot be climbed without a ladder. The southern shore is gradually becoming overgrown with reeds and trees, mainly aspens, making these unusually shaped stones harder to see. Many boulders are also scattered throughout the pine forest itself. The most famous local boulder is Aida Kivi. Its name is usually translated as the granary stone, since its shape is said to resemble a granary, although this resemblance is far from obvious. In Estonian, stress normally falls on the first syllable, but if the stress shifts to the second syllable, the name becomes Aida. Aida is, of course, the famous opera by Giuseppe Verdi, telling the story of the tragic love between the Ethiopian princess Aida, enslaved in Egypt, and the Egyptian commander Radames. Although Verdi's opera made the name Aida world famous, the Egyptologist Auguste Mariette, author of the libretto, claimed that he was seeking an authentic ancient Egyptian sound. Comparative linguists have traced the root of this name back as far as the 10th millennium BCE. The root adid meant a female relative. From this same root come the Finnish word äiti, meaning mother, and the Estonian word ait, now often used to refer to an old woman. In modern Estonian, the word iait, pronounced eit, carries a negative connotation, meaning not only woman, but also old woman, or even hag. This shift may reflect the transition from a matriarchal to a patriarchal society, or the later Christianization that replaced earlier belief systems. The preservation of the original meaning in Finnish, however, makes the latter explanation more likely. The stone therefore most likely marked a sacred site dedicated to a female deity, the ancient mother, an ancestral goddess. Archaeologists believe that Aida Kivi was indeed a sacrificial stone. This interpretation is supported by a local legend, according to which the founders of Luhusalu village, a young man and a woman, found one another thanks to the singing of their future ancestress, who stood atop Aida Kivi. The distance between the stone and the islet of Nabe is more than 3 kilometers, so her voice must have carried far. A local Ada in every sense. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. The prehistory of humanity, a time before written records, explored through comparative linguistics, will be the subject of the second part of our documentary, devoted specifically to the prehistory of Estonia. Luhusalu, a name that translates roughly as lowland grove, gradually gives way to a place called Laulasmaa. Its name means the singing land. It comes from the soft, low sound the sand makes under your footsteps. This natural phenomenon isn't unique. It can be found in other parts of the world as well, for example in the deserts of Central Asia. There are several scientific explanations, but no single theory has been confirmed. And yet, the reason may feel quite simple. In a place like this, anyone can sense what happiness really is. After all, people don't sing only when they lack a voice. They sing when they're happy. And here, it sometimes feels as if even the sand itself begins to sing. From the southern shore of the peninsula, the final point of our journey comes clearly into view. The Pakri Peninsula, about 50 kilometers from the capital. That's where Estonia's #1 landmark is located. Only there can you see its true face, the one usually hidden behind everyday scenery. Anyone who has lived here their whole life and never seen the southwestern coast of the peninsula might realize they still don't fully know where they've been living all this time. Because until you stand there, you haven't really seen the real Estonia.